Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be featuring the Flandre, a ship I bought a couple of days ago, and now I've been testing it out to see what it's actually worth. The first thing that really sticks out on the ship is probably the health pool. The ship has a 75.4k HP pool, which at tier 8 is actually incredibly impressive. Generally speaking, this is basically an Alsace hull. This is a tier 9 hull that's being slotted into tier 8. And you actually come with a fair bit of armor. The downside of most of the armor is that it's French, which means of course you got 32mm bow, stern, deck, upper belt and so forth, which means that you will be eating significant amounts of HE pens from basically everything. However, your citadel protection is surprisingly good. It's a series of layered armors. You have a torpedo belt that's 50mm thick. Behind that you have the belt itself that's 350mm thick, and then you have citadel protection for another 50mm of plating, and I think the turtleback itself had something like 50mm as well. So the turtleback doesn't actually bounce AP the same way like a German turtleback does, so don't expect to be invulnerable in brawling range. You can be citadeled, but it actually requires a really high amount of penetration to pull it off against the ship. So besides everything else being 32mm, the actual citadel protection on the ship is quite impressive. I did mention that the torpedo belt was 50mm of plating, and the torpedo damage reduction is very significant as well. It's 44%, which once again for a tier 8 battleship is incredibly impressive. I mean, it's basically Massachusetts levels of torpedo reduction. However, this doesn't mean that it's some sort of super tank, because, well, the ship has standard damage control, which has a 80-second cooldown, and it lasts 15 seconds, and more importantly you have a bog standard heal, which means no shorter cooldown, no improved duration on the heal, and most importantly you only get 3 heals. The other battleships by default get 4 heals, you only get 3 heals. So obviously this is a significant weakness to have. And in fact, this weakness kind of goes hand in hand with your high HP pool. At first glance, this very high HP pool is a blessing, but then when you consider that fires burn for percentage damage, just like heals tick for percentage damage, fires and floodings also burn for percentage damage. So the bigger the health pool, the more damage you will take from fires. And generally speaking, fires aren't that big of a deal, because you do have your 3 heals to mitigate it with. But the problem here is that, oh, you do have your healing to mitigate it with, but with this thing only having 3 heals, the fires actually deal, well, they're generally just a bigger threat to you than they are to most other battleships. That makes fire prevention, in my opinion, basically absolute must-have on this battleship. I generally run it on all battleships, but on this one in particular, it is very much a must-have. Now, in terms of handling, the ship is, well, it's fast. I mean, it's French, it's fast, it does 33.5, but you don't get a speed boost. In fact, consumable-wise, you don't have spotter planes, you don't have fighter planes, you don't have anything going for you besides the heal and the damage gun. That is basically it. I think the turning circle was 910 meters, so that is obviously significant. Once again, tier 9 hull. The rudder shift is also 16.6, which is also quite significant. Note that if you're running a speed flag, like I am in this commentary, you can bump that 33.5 up to 35.2, which does make the battleship very fast. Overall though, my main issue with the ship isn't so much the hull itself. I think the hull is quite good. I didn't even get into the AA. It has a fair bit of long-range AA. Obviously with battleships it only has 75% accuracy on the flak and on the continuous damage, but basically all of the AA is on the long range, which makes you quite useful at helping out teammates and in general defending yourself against strikes before they get point blank close to you. So the AA power for tier 8 is quite impressive, and combined with all the other features, this ship is pretty decent. The hull in general is pretty decent. In fact, concealment wise you reach 12.7, which isn't in any way a downside either. The main issue, however, is everything in terms of firepower. There had to be a drawback, and with Wargaming giving you this tier 9 hull with all these bonuses at tier 8, the main drawback is the guns. We'll start off with the secondaries, just so we can discard them from the future, from any commentary in the future. The secondaries, the majority of the secondaries are 100mm guns. And these 100mm guns have 17mm of HE pen. This means that they cannot even penetrate destroyers. That's how garbage they are. You will have no success using them for anything else than ideally starting fires. The range is quite good. The default range is 7.6 kilometers, but obviously you don't want to build around this in any way. The damage output is simply too anemic. Then we get to the final part of gun power, and that is the 380mm guns. Now, one of my things that I complained the most about with the Marco Polo was that it was so Deadeye reliant. Well, Flandre somehow is even more Deadeye reliant. It's kind of baffling. First of all, the guns are 380mm guns. Now obviously 380mm guns are not an upside at tier 8 anymore. I would say they are more really of a downside at this point. You want to be going into the 400s because you start running into 27mm plating, especially if you get up tiered. The pen is, however, very good. It's better than the Germans, the Bismarcks, the Tirpitz. It's almost on par with the Italians, the Romas and such, that they generally have very, very good penetration. The problem is that your base reload is 33 seconds. And this is very long for 9 380mm guns. The rest of the pack, well, they sit around about 30 seconds on their guns. I mean, the Bismarcks, the Tirpitzes, they have 380s. They have 8 of them, but they have a 26-second reload. So I mean, in terms of damage output, you are pretty close to the bottom of the pack. Don't expect any sort of amazing damage output. In fact, one of the main things I noted while playing this game was that it was really hard to have these big standout games. It actually provided quite a lot of consistency. In the sense that I never really had any extremely good games, but I never really had any extremely poor games either. The hull is so tanky, and it kind of keeps you alive long enough that you will always put in a pretty decent effort. But it was very hard to have standout games. You know, some ships you have standout games right from the get-go. In this one, it always seemed like a bit of a struggle because, well, the guns aren't really that impressive. The firepower in general isn't really that impressive. And the tankiness is not that easy to utilize because 32mm plating plus lack of healing means that if you are under fire, you will go down quite steadily and quite easily, and there's really not a whole lot you can do about that. The turret traverse is actually quite good. The build I'm running is, well, honestly, it's the standard build I run on basically all battleships. That is the standard expert loader, turret traverse, AR, concealment, expert fire prevention, Deadeye, priority target, and finally preventive maintenance. Because, well, ultimately it's French turrets and I don't want them being knocked out. But it's hard to see this ship as anything else than, well, kind of a placeholder. Or an excuse to keep Deadeye the way it is. Because once Deadeye is gone, and you can no longer rely on that improved dispersion, basically that almost 20% bonus to reduction in dispersion, once you can no longer rely on that, and you're stuck with Flandre's default dispersion, with 33-second reload, it's gonna feel very much like the Marco Polo, which is gonna be not a very fun experience. Marco Polo, as long as Deadeye is active, is also quite enjoyable. As soon as Deadeye gets deactivated, it starts becoming a real struggle. And you're going to see a fair few examples here. This game is actually quite close. We are, what, 9 versus 9? Blowing my horn for the hipper so he doesn't accidentally bump into me if he's trying to avoid shells. Just a general courtesy, because sometimes when you're playing a cruiser and you're trying to dodge away, you don't pay attention to what's behind you, and if you bump into a teammate at that point, it will get you killed. So basically just giving a warning that watch out, I'm behind you. Up-tiering of this ship is of course not very enjoyable because 27mm platings makes life significantly harder, but I have found that once again the speed and the general durability of the hull allows you to be pretty effective on the map and reposition quite effectively on the map. I've also had some good experiences of doing drive-bys because the high penetration, the fast turret traverse, and the general speed has allowed that to happen. What I do have to move on to is what you just saw there. You saw the way the camera kind of glitched into the ship, and that is because the ship is actually bugged. And it blows my mind that this ship has such a simple bug. If you hold down right click, normally if you hold down right click on a ship, you go into free camera, which means your guns are locked into the last position you looked, and you can move your camera around to spectate what's going on around what's going on elsewhere. Basically, you can use it to gain map awareness, and I use it frequently on my ships. In fact, if you look at any of my commentaries of any other ships, you'll see that very often I'll just hold down right click and look around and see what's going on, keep the guns locked on wherever it is, while basically gaining awareness of what's going on around me. In the Flandre, if you press the right click, the camera jumps into zoomed in mode right into one of the turrets, and you can't scroll to zoom out. You're stuck in it. And it happens every time. It's not a once every so many games or whatever bug. It's every single game, every time. Every time you press right click, it goes into this weird zoomed in mode, and you can't dislodge it in any way. Basically, you can't use right click at all if you're playing this ship. And this kind of bug just blows my mind, because literally one person at Wargaming, one single person, albeit the lowliest intern, one person testing this ship once should have noticed this bug, and it should have been fixed. One person playing once should have noticed. One guy going into a training room, one guy, look, there it is again, that bug. One guy doing anything in terms of testing this ship should have noticed it. But it wasn't tested, and it wasn't noticed. And this really blows my mind, because it means that, well, it kind of highlights to me that there's really not people playing the game left in the office. They just, they design and build the ship based on the spreadsheets, and then they just squeeze it out. And I read a reply from Wargaming regarding this bug, and they said, oh yeah, thank you for the feedback. We'll try to fix it to 10.3. That's the next patch. They're not even gonna hotfix it. They sold people this ship for what? About 40 euros, $50? They sold people this ship with this blatant obvious bug that could probably be hotfixed extremely easily, and they're not even willing to fix it. They're like, nah, whatever, we'll look at it in the next patch. Thanks for beta testing our product, and thank you for giving us our money. and it absolutely just blows my mind. Like, who does that? How can you do that? Like, I just don't get it. It's incredible to me that they don't even feel any pressure to get it fixed. And apparently the community hasn't really raised much of a stink about it. They were like, well, okay, well, we have this permanent bug on the ship, or this bug on the ship, and we're gonna look at this bug for a full month before it gets fixed. I remember when there was a bug where AA was doing just a slight bit too much damage. AA was doing more damage than intended. They hotfixed that in 24 hours so that the carriers wouldn't lose too many planes. But when it comes to this, apparently, on the premium that they just sold to people, not really that big of a deal. And even now, knowing this bug, they haven't actually made any sort of statement warning buyers about it. In fact, I haven't seen any official statement that, hey, watch out, by the way, this ship currently has this bug, which can be extremely frustrating. I found it to be superbly annoying. You should watch out for it. Like, hey, heads up, like, you should wait until this bug is fixed. Nope. There has been no announcement, nothing. Nothing. So... Also, I'm not sure if the ship just has a lot of lock-on bugs or if it's just me, but dispersion like that, it looks like a lock-on bug. And I've been seeing it a surprising amount, especially in this ship. Now, I thought lock-on was not tied to individual ships, but then again, I also thought that camera wasn't tied to individual ships. But I've seen these situations where I shoot like, well, the Cleveland full broadside at 9.5 km, and the shells just go full drunk. And, well, that wasn't quite as bad. It was pretty bad, okay? That was non-Deadeye Flandre bad. But the dispersion just goes full wonk. So, this ship, it very much comes with a disclaimer that, well, Wargaming actually gave it its own disclaimer. This ship might be balanced in the future. So this means that they're selling premiums that they might nerf or buff later. So if you buy them, you have to buy them with the expectation that God knows what they might do to it. And I'm not sure if they will offer any refunds since they've added that disclaimer before they sold it. I wouldn't count on it. So this ship comes with a lot of questions with it. Is it gonna be like this a couple of months from now? I don't know. Are they gonna nerf the hell out of it? Are they gonna buff it? I don't know. What about when Deadeye gets removed? Right now the ship is heavily reliant on Deadeye to actually be effective. If Deadeye gets removed, what the hell do we do then? And this glitch, is the glitch with the camera the only thing we have, or is there actual lock-on bugs? We really don't know. There's a lot of questions that make it extremely hard for me in any way to actually recommend this ship. Like, why would I? Why would anyone right now want to give money to basically beta test this product? It's not like the Flandre really stands out in any way. In terms of firepower, well, basically every other tier 8 battleship basically has more firepower. Almost. Okay, I'm not gonna say all of them. There's ships like Monarch and such. But the only thing it really has going for it right now is a tanky hull. That's pretty much its thing. And it does help it a lot. It does give it a lot of effectiveness, and generally I do like the turret setup that this ship has, but I wouldn't call this some sort of super standout ship in any way, or it's a strong hull with poor firepower and a lot of frustrating bugs, and the potential of being nerfed in the future despite being a premium, we can't tell. So right now, I would not recommend buying this ship. Honestly, very hard. In fact, considering that this ship straight up shipped with this blatant obvious bug that anyone could have noticed, it also kind of puts, in my opinion or in my book, a pretty big question mark on any other premiums they're pushing out. If they're not willing to even test something as simple as this, how many bugs are the other premiums going to come out with? Because this isn't something obscure, this isn't something hard to spot, this isn't something like that's gonna catch you off guard. This is one intern just booting up the game once, trying all the buttons on the ship and realizing, hey, wait a minute, one of these buttons don't work. That's how simple it is. Any basic Q&A should have noticed this, but it's pretty obvious that there is no more any Q&A being used for this game, for this product. And that just really worries me. We managed to flip the cap. At this point, I'm just going to rush in. Once again, I've used only 2 heals, but I still only have 1 heal remaining. But I'm also using the Honor Captain, which boosts my reload. I'm running AR, plus Honor has improved AR boosting, so being this low HP, my reload is actually 28 seconds, which is pretty nice. So I'm just gonna close in and try to blap these guys as fast as possible. I finally get some good hits on the Normandy, pick up a double Citadel, pick up a Kraken, and at this point the game is done and dusted because they can't really get to the other ships without going past me. The carrier has been striking me a bit, and you've gotten to see the AA to some extent, but I mean, it's a tier 6 carrier and I'm a tier 8 battleship. It's still not like I can still fully stop his strikes unless he eats my flak, but luckily, as we can see, he is grabbing some of the flak clouds on the way in. Still gets the strike through though, so of course any higher tier carriers will still be able to bully you around quite easily. At this point, we're just gonna try to rush in, see if we can get some kill the carrier potential, get some damage on the Bayern. Bayern is giving a fair bit of broadside. The firing angles aren't actually that good. When I turn to use my back turret, you see that I'm giving enough broadside that he actually gets a huge amount of damage in on me. So it's hard to use the third turret on the ship without exposing yourself. In fact, in most situations where you're trading like this, you just want to avoid using your back turret at all, because it exposes too much of your superstructure, or too much of your broadside. It also has this huge superstructure which already makes you quite vulnerable, so generally speaking, you want to play it kind of like a Richelieu, except you end up losing out on one of your turrets. Why not just play the Richelieu instead? That's fundamentally my question. I don't really see it being much worse of a ship than this one is. Besides the tankiness, there's really not a whole lot going on with this one. Bayern ducks behind the island. This game ends quite quickly, and there's not really much else going on. I do break 200,000 damage, which I am quite happy about. I'm not gonna go into the build on this one because it's standard Deadeye build. I'm sorry, but all the builds are very generic these days. I build fire prevention, I build concealment expert, and I build Deadeye. I build priority target, and I build expert loader and expert marksman. And then if I put adrenaline rush as the third point, the only third point. That's pretty much it. The last point, if you have a 21 pointer, goes into preventive maintenance. 7 citadels, 5 kills, I solo capped 1, Confederate, high caliber, a lot of damage, a lot of rewards. Since I'm running all the bonus flags and stuff, this is my EU account, so I'm basically swimming in resources. That's why I'm running so much bonus stuff that gives me so many resources. Stats wise, we do take 2.9 base XP, and we do top the scoreboard, which is of course always satisfying. We were top tier this game, of course, so it was kind of expected for us to carry. Detailed report wise, well, the potential is 1.6 million, which is always nice. In terms of, by the way, healing, you note that the damage received isn't that high, and you shouldn't actually expect it to be that high. Even though the health pool on the ship is quite impressive, if a game goes on long enough that you can blow through all your heals, you actually fall behind the other tier 8s in terms of tankiness. Basically, their healing potential allows them to outmatch you. Something like the German battleships and, for example, North Carolina, if a game goes on long enough, because of the healing that they can put in, they can actually tank more damage than you can. So that losing that one heal makes you more vulnerable. On the other hand, you are more sustainable against high alpha damage hits like torpedo volleys or big AP citadel volleys, but you are more susceptible to dot damage because of your high health base pool and basically lack of healing. Overall, Flandre, heavily Deadeye reliant, comes shipped with bugs, and it comes shipped with a disclaimer that, well, Wargaming can basically do whatever the hell they want to it, and there's nothing you can say about it because they warned you that they might do it. So, would I recommend this ship? No. Just no. I don't actually think it's a bad ship. I think it's a decent ship, a bit too Deadeye reliant, but I think it's a decent ship. I've had some pretty good games in it, but with all of these things going on at once, why would I recommend you spend so much money on this thing? It just doesn't make any sense. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the commentary, and I will talk to you guys next time.